Welcome to this mini webinar about the 1828 census. The archives of and about the 1828 census were inscribed on the UNESCO Australian Memory of the World Register last year. It recognises how really significant these particular archives are. This is our website, records.nsw.gov.au. To locate the 1828 census, go to Research A to Z, C for census, and then census and musters. And so there's a link here to the 1828 census. But just before we do go to there, I just wanted to point out what a great wealth of information you can find here about later census and also more broadly about the census and musters. And very usefully, this list of common abbreviations will really help you when you're looking at the original alphabetical return of the 1828 census. These are all of the abbreviations that you will see in that. So we've digitised NRS 1272, the alphabetical return, and it's available on our website. And you can get to it through this link. So we're going to start by looking at one of the volumes. This is the volume that covers C through to G. And this is what it looks like. So here's a family. So these brackets indicate a family group. This is James, Hannah, and Elizabeth Connolly. And this is the information that it gives you. So James is 50. CP means that he's got a conditional pardon. He came out on the Atlas one in 1802 and was sentenced to life. So he's not going to become a free person, but he's got a conditional pardon, which means that he can work for himself. The family's a Catholic family, and James is a flax dresser. So Hannah is a little bit older than James. She's freed by servitude because she became out on the experiment in 1804 and just had a 7-year sentence. If we move across the double page entry, it tells you the family live at Richmond. They've got 40 acres of land, and not only are the whole 40 cleared, they're also all under cultivation. If you scroll down the district list, it just gives you an idea of the breadth of the coverage of the 1828 census. So from Richmond to St Vincent's, which is a county on the south coast of New South Wales, Melville in the west of Sydney, Bathurst, Goulburn Plains, Botany, Brisbane Water, so around the central coast, Prospect, Camden, Evan, around Penrith, Patterson's Plains, so in that Hunter Valley sort of area. Just a few tricks when you're using this. You'll see lots of these marks. If you haven't come across them before, they're dittos. So it tells you that not only is Nicholas Connolly a GS, a government servant, but all of these other people are as well. But you'll also see dittos written like this, and that indicates that Nicholas Connolly is a labourer because there's a ditto from there to there. And you'll notice there's no surname here. When you've got over 36,000 people to write up, I guess you only wanted to write the surname once for simplicity. So you'll see the surname at the top of the page, and then it'll be blank beyond that. I wanted to look now at how you can use the digitised census. So if you open up a volume of the digitised census, it will look like this. And there are some options across the top. Search doesn't work. It's designed to work in paper turn view for a printed text. And of course, the 1828 census is all handwritten. Overview takes you basically to a summary of the whole volume, all 545 pages of it. So you can use this to help you work out how to find the people that you're interested in the census. You need to think about the number of pages, think about some of the surnames that are common. So this is a volume that covers Pop to Tig. So for instance, there'll be all of the Smiths somewhere in this volume. So you pretty much need to go in, click, see where the surnames are up to, and then move through the volume by doing that. You can download as a PDF, but the whole volume is the PDF. So while you can do it, it will take a really long time to do so. You can print entries from here, and particularly if you go to current pages, it allows you to print, to save as a PDF and then have that to use at home. You can also magnify even further in that view, which is great. Just going to go through some more information about the census. So the 1828 census was the first census held in Australia, and it was held in November 1828 after it was found that a governor had no right to compel free men to come to a muster. So musters have been held for convicts for a number of years, but to get an accurate idea of what the state of the colony was, they needed to include people that were free. So they had to do an Act of Parliament to be able to implement the census. You can see the Act itself is literally a page and a half, and if you take out the title, it's really a page long. But it does have quite a lot of detail, including the fact that there was a £10 fine that could be imposed for non-compliance. Now, who was in the Act and who wasn't? Well-known historical figures such as Lieutenant General Ralph Darling, who was the governor, and his family, Thomas Livingstone Mitchell, the Surveyor General, Elizabeth MacArthur, Mary Reeby, Simeon Lord, Francis Greenway, William Charles Wentworth, William Lawson are examples of all of the people that were really quite well known in the colony, together with ordinary men, women and children, and all listed in the family groups. Aboriginal people and the military aren't in the census. The fact that Aboriginal people are not included provides an important pointer to the priorities, focus and values of the colony at that time. The British regiments, so the military, were really just stationed here and so not regarded as part of our population. Where does it cover? Always a good point. Colony of New South Wales as it was in 1828, so that includes Norfolk Island and Moreton Bay, and surprising places like Raffles Bay and Melville Island in what is now the Northern Territory, and King George's Sound in what is now Western Australia. They were all part of New South Wales in 1828. Van Diemen's Land had separated in 1825, so it's not there. So this is the 1828 census alphabetical return in all its glory, in its purpose-built cabinet. It's made up of 6 volumes, and as you saw, it's all digitised and available on our website. It's all but complete. There's a couple of pages missing at the very beginning of the first volume, so literally the first 90 names are not there of the A's. But no census is ever complete. It's estimated about 2,000 people who are eligible to be in the census were not there. The 1828 census gives a picture of the colony about 40 years after the first fleet arrived. The colony is much more than just a penal settlement by this time, as the census really definitely shows. I think one of the things that really indicates that is the range of occupations of people. There's quite a few unusual occupations, including artist, astronomer, bell ringer, boot closer, carver and gilder, cowboy, cowkeeper, flax dresser, as we saw with James Connolly, jobber, mantua maker, needle boy, pig boy, sawpit cleaner. But one of the most unusual must be this one. So John Mazagora is listed, so this is what he said about himself, as a dealer in curiosities. That piqued the interest, and so after a little bit of research, we found that he died in 1838. His probate record says that he was a bird stuffer. So I suspect that means that possibly in addition to other things, he carried out taxidermy and sold that. This might be a good rival. So down here we have Thomas Hughes, and he's listed as hangman. We don't know whether he or the person writing up the alphabetical return added finisher of the law, which is another way, I guess, of looking at what that means. So the alphabetical return is the end product, but it began with householders' returns. In the same way that you can probably remember filling out your census now, either on computer or on paper forms in the past. That's how the 1828 census started. The individual householders form records all of the information that you can see in the alphabetical returns. So information about the names of the family and of the servants, because in the same way that when you fill out a census now, you record who's in the house at the time, the household was the family and servants if they had them, and the details of their information. And then on the other side of the form, there is a land and stock return, which records the district and the name of the farm if they gave that, name of the proprietor and tenant. So a wealth of information. These have been microfilmed and are in the Archives Resources Kit, so they're available in the 40 community access points across the state, and they're also on Ancestry. They haven't survived for every district, unfortunately. So this is a list of the districts they have survived for. Most of them are in the Greater Sydney area, as you can see, though there are some from further out, like Bathurst and Wellington. This is what the householders' returns look like. This is Edward Gooden. Here, he's 66 and his family. And then his two servants, one of whom is listed as a labourer, and one of who's listed as a servant. One's a free person and one's still a government servant. Edward Gooden couldn't write or chose not to sign, so he's just put his mark on it. And then on the back is the information about the land that he held and the fact he had 6 horses and 42 horned cattle. And so the breaking news for this mini webinar is that we've digitised the householders' returns, and we think beginning next week they'll start to progressively go up on our website through collection search. So do look out for those. They're going to be a really great addition. There's a group of other little series that go with the 1828 census alphabetical return and make up the material that was inscribed on the Australian Memory of the World Register. The district abstracts are based exactly as they say. There's one which is an abstract for population and one for land and stock. Where they've survived, which is where there are householders' returns, they give a summary for the district, but they do include householders' names. So absolutely fabulous for local history in terms of being able to look at what was happening in that area in a summary form, and even to look at who was around, if you're looking at it from a family history point of view, who was around your people in that area. The working papers are basically 2 lists, and really these are the lists that list the convicts who are still working or assigned by the government. There isn't a lot of information in most cases for those convicts, but it does mean that they show up in the 1828 census. The Colonial Secretary's special bundles for the 1828 census are really about how the 1828 census was produced. The bundle consists of instructions and circulars and samples of forms to be used, and there is some examples of forms that ultimately weren't used, which in themselves are quite interesting. And this shows that the forms were especially designed for this census, and they would certainly be the first such documents designed in Australia. So it's also emphasising that starting to break away from Britain in terms of producing own internal documents. The forms are also printed here too. And if you think about it, this was an amazing achievement for the colony. So it covers about 36,000 people. It literally covers from east to west coast and all the way up to the Northern Territory. And it was done presumably by ship and on horseback in many cases. So how was it collected? So the forms were printed, distributed to constables and other appointed collectors in the various districts, and then taken out to each of the households where they either willingly or unwillingly filled in the forms. Whether the form was completed by the householder or by the constable or clerk collector, because there would have been quite a few people who couldn't write, all householders had to sign or place their mark to indicate that the information recorded was correct. So in many instances, this may be the only existing signature or mark of this person because civil registration for birth, deaths and marriages wasn't introduced until 1856. And then the other question that I like to ponder on, from those household returns covering all of those households, how did they manage to get it into an alphabetical return? No data entry into Excel. I picture lots of householders' returns being spread out and reorganised, because remember, if you think about the Edwin Gooden householder return, his family's fine, they're all G's, but his servants have got different surnames and need to appear in different parts of the return. So it just indicates what an amazing job they did to achieve this. And then just looking at some of the ways that this information from the 1828 census can be used. We hold passenger lists from about July 1826. So the census is probably the main place that you're going to find information about arrivals where passenger lists haven't survived for that early period. I said the civil registration of birth, deaths and marriages wasn't introduced until 1856. So the census may be the only evidence of a birth in the colony. It records people in family groups, so bringing people together to help determine which person coming on what ship is actually the person that is part of your family. It can be used as a starting point for other research. Many people find they have convict ancestors, I think, through the 1828 census. And it's just a rich source of data which can be used for a wide variety of historical research, including social history, cultural studies, agriculture, economics. It really is up to the imagination how it can be used. Thanks.